Okay. Okay, I think we'll get started. It's 11:05, so I'll just get into it essentially all the way through. Thanks very much for everyone for attending. There's people online and there's people here in the actual conference room. Thanks very much for attending in person as well. Appreciate it. All the way through. Is your mic on?
Yeah.
Yes, that's brilliant. Yeah, cool. So thanks for your time all the way through. So my name is Andrew Costello. I work in the Disability Service as the Assistant Technology Officer, meeting students regarding inclusive technologies essentially all the way through. So this topic is close to my I suppose my job essentially all the way through to ensure that information is accessible and usable. So I've been working with my colleague here, Ross Coleman, which I'll introduce in a second, and with the Trinity Inc team for the last year or so regarding strategies, regarding how we can get, I suppose, information in a more usable way and easy also as well all the way through. Because a lot of the stuff is easy and straightforward. It just needs a bit of knowledge essentially all the way through. So Ross, I'll let you introduce yourself and then I'll jump back in myself after.
And in the graduate intern, and I'm working with a team to help promote accessible information technology across the campus. So I'll offer like Blackboard Ally. This is a topic that is really close to my heart as a disabled person, because I believe that all students should have equal and inclusive access to learning material.
Super, Ross. Thanks for that all the way through. So yeah, so I'll get into the short PowerPoint, nothing too heavy essentially all the way through. I think the session's very light essentially all the way through, and we're going to touch on obviously the major issues, simple issues, I suppose, within Microsoft Word that we can look at to again to upgrade and look at regarding how you create information, and we'll touch on obviously Blackboard Ally. As Ross has alluded to, Ally is a tool that's embedded into our VLE, which is Blackboard, essentially to help academics or anybody who uses Blackboard as they upload information into it. It'll provide feedback to you on your level of accessibility or usability of the document. And if it's negative or poor, it will give you some information on how to actually adjust it essentially all the way through. And we'll touch on some of these stuff here today all the way through. Yeah, exactly all the way through. So yeah, so we'll go through the inclusive learning, Ally instructor feedback, some top tips, and then we'll grab some feedback at the end all the way through. Well, I suppose for me, I suppose just to give a bit of background again all the way through, I suppose diversity is important. Students, obviously, we have over 2,500 students registered, or just short of 2,500 students registered with the disability service, essentially all the way through, coming from a whole range of diverse backgrounds. And kind of, I suppose, teaching preferences or how they take in information where they've come from previously in their previous education. So we see a need for information to be accessible and usable, as being important, as something that we should be looking at as a university. And this tool, I suppose, will help us, I suppose, throw some light on it. Diversity obviously takes many forms. All the way through, I know learning styles comes up, and there is a conversation around learning styles, but how students, I suppose, take in information, visual, audio, kinetic essentially all the way through, is important to note all the way through. And, as we meet, when I meet with students myself within my own service, they would speak about how they would take in information or have difficulty taking in, especially I suppose the traditional forms of information, which is printed text essentially all the way through. I'm dyslexic myself, so I suppose I've seen some of the impacts on my own learning essentially as I'm going through, and how simple things like font or contrast essentially again can help, or again would, I suppose put up a barrier, I suppose, to my learning, or might make it a small bit difficult for me to access the information essentially all the way through, and make it useful for myself all the way through. And there is, I suppose, an accessibility maturity model essentially all the way through. So where you are on that model essentially all the way through, and how you would perceive the importance of information, being important to you essentially all the way through. So I mean, for example, you could see yourself, well, I don't have anybody in front of me. I don't think I have anybody with a, with a disability, or with I suppose coming from my diverse background, why do I need to make my information? It looks fine for me. I can see it, I can read it. I'm going to put it up there and be fine all the way through. Or coming from the other end of the stream is very much, do you work with, or you're I suppose amenable to seeing that there's this range of diverse population sitting in front of you essentially, and you see more of the partnership. You might obviously even ask for feedback regarding your material that you would post or use to make it more useful, not just for yourself, but for everybody who would be using that information, just not even in the present, but also moving into the future if you had to, I suppose, reuse that information all the way through. So TechDis have put up that nice, I suppose maturity model there that we can look at all the way through. And it I suppose looks at it. It helps, I suppose, to give you some kind of framework of where you are. I'm very aware that you're looking at a different look to me, so that might be a bit more easier for you. All right, straight on the right. I'm just sorry, people in the camp here on site are looking at what I'm seeing at, and you should be seeing something a bit more all the way through. So I apologize for that. Thank you all right. Well, so just to touch on, I suppose, the diverse needs, the cognitive challenges that people would have, I suppose, and how Ally and Blackboard Ally and how accessible information helps in this area all the way through. I suppose may have difficulty, I suppose, in again receiving and processing the information. It takes them longer to read something. And to understand it, you might have to reread it again numerous times all the way through. Might be easily distracted essentially with some content within it, even the background font or color essentially all the way through, or the language that has been used within it as well all the way through. And may have, I suppose, trouble concentrating, and I suppose rely on, I suppose, assistive technology tools to actually engage in the information all the way through. So text to speech there, where I'm able to highlight some text and it read back to me. If the document is not laid out or provided to me in a format that I can do that in, I suppose it creates barriers to how we would access the information all the way through. So, there is, I suppose, just to give you some kind of overview all the way through. Ross, do you want to speak about that area? I suppose why we are trying to be inclusive.
Yeah, sure. So we are trying to be inclusive because we recognize, as Andrew's previously allude to, that the student population is very diverse, and that students come from a wide range of different backgrounds, and they have a wide range of different learning styles or ways that they take in information. So the reason why we try and make our documents accessible, and the reason why we use tools such as Blackboard Blackboard Ally is that we want to ensure that our learning material aids to as many students as possible. So we need it to be easy to navigate, easy to read, you know, engaging, user friendly, and overall we want to be an effective learning tool that can be adapted to different formats and used by different students.
Thanks, Ross. So, I mean, to get into Blackboard Ally essentially all the way through. So, as I said at the start, Blackboard Ally is a tool that's embedded into Blackboard itself, into the VLA. It's a tool that's been in the college for the last, say, 18 months, essentially all the way through. It was really based on obviously COVID times, and I suppose a lot of stuff being online, and they really moved to online teaching. But it also obviously has benefits for students who are back in person on how they would access the information, use it essentially all the way through. So I suppose it generates for the students access formats that they can actually use or have a choice from. So I'll show you this quickly, essentially in action, essentially all the way through. So if I have a Word document as an instructor and I post that into my Blackboard Ally tool or into my module, Ally also basically does this automatically in the background, looks at it, and then allows the student to then pull that down in a format that they wish. Either that be Braille, it could be text, it could be audio, it could be, again, a tag PDF scenario all the way through. So all those different formats that allow the student to I suppose, access the information in an easier method against what their choice is. Ally does that on the background for them, essentially all the way through. And it also provides to the instructor, as they would, I suppose, post their content, a score on how usable their document is from their creation. So if your document is poor, it will pull back, I suppose, it'll give you some kind of traffic lines and I suppose type scenario, as the slide there shows on where it is. Essentially, you know, it needs help, a little better, almost there, or obviously perfect, essentially all the way through. It also provides feedback on how to fix up those issues in the document. Okay, so you're not posting stuff that's in an accessible format. Ally on the all format scenario will only work if the document is at a certain level. If you, for example, say if you had a scanned image here within the college and then you posted that to your Ally to your module, the all format scenario won't be able to work because it can't see the text per se all the way through. And there's a whole range of things all the way through, but it does give you, I suppose, a good starting point. And Ally is not the be all end all. Won't make everything perfect just by using the tool. It's a starting point to allow you to look at the information that you're posting, how to make some simple, straightforward enough changes to your document. And that will then provide a more accessible, usable way for your content as you I suppose post more stuff to your module throughout the year. As this is focused around, I suppose, Microsoft Word, we said we just look quickly at 4 or 5 simple things within Microsoft Word that you can actually use. So this is external of Ally, and we'll go back to Ally at the end. But I suppose, again, Microsoft Word itself has its own accessibility kind of check in it as well. So if you're just using Word here, I'm not talking about PDF or PowerPoint. We'll do sessions on them at a later date. Word, I suppose, allows you, obviously, is the kind of main tool that, again, that a lot of students or staff would use so again, when you go to create their information, essentially, and then they might transfer that into a PDF or essentially, or even a PowerPoint these days, which you can do. Some of the things when it comes to using Microsoft Word, it's font to font style. Essentially all the way through, using a sans serif font over a serif font. essentially all the way through. You'll always know the difference between both, essentially, with the curls and tails at the end of a serif font, essentially all the way through. And our policy here in college is always to use a sans serif font, essentially all the way through. We don't say you have to use a certain font per se, but a sans serif font is what is. Something like Calibri, for example, is a perfect example of a sans serif font, essentially all the way through. And spacing essentially between the letters, essentially all the way through. So again, using line spacing of basically 1.5 essentially all the way through. I say all that kind of stuff should be used. I'll move on. Also within it, I suppose try to avoid accessible underline or italics or block capitals, essentially all the way through. So if you're looking to emphasize a certain point, bold should be used, or the research will point towards bold being the way to do it, essentially all the way through. It's visually difficult for someone to pick up an underline or an italics over you, and I suppose, and also using block capitals is seen as just not good etiquette, essentially all the way through when it comes to emphasizing stuff, essentially. So bold within text, is the preferred route, essentially all the way through. And style and structure is really important, essentially all the way through. And what is style and structure? I suppose it's the use of headings within a document. And this is vital when it comes to students trying to navigate a document. Someone, especially more so with a visual impairment, who can't visually see the difference between a heading and text, or have to, I suppose, engage in text that's quite large, essentially, and obviously then would rely on the table of contents to use it. Style and structure gives that kind of, as I said, structure to the document, and that kind of table of contents to it, where you're using headings, essentially. So within Word, obviously, you have an option to use heading 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, essentially, where you can go in and use a document. I'll open up a doc here and I'll see if I can get it to do its thing. See if I can share that. Let me see what happens. So the headings, what we speak about here, are the headings here at top, essentially all the way through. Headings 1, 2, 3s, and 4s, essentially all the way through, working your way through to, I suppose as much as you want, but I suppose you would kind of past experience wouldn't go beyond heading 3 or 4. And as you're working through the document, you would use that structure, with that being the title document at the very top, essentially all the way through, and then using your heading styles going, as you work through a document, you're literally tagging the document as you work your way through it, essentially all the way through. So title document would be title, and so on and so on. And you change the document, obviously, as you work your way through. You can do that, and it keeps, I suppose, a current, more, I suppose, streamlined way, I suppose, of ensuring that the document looks the same and consistent throughout it. It also then provides automatically to the user, to the end user, the table of contents, which they can actually then use the document by running the table of contents. They can see which is heading 1, 2s, and 3s, and 4s, and they can jump through the document a lot more easily all the way through. What I've seen previously is, obviously, this is a kind of Word document that's badly set up, essentially all the way through on purpose, is that the document looks the same from top to bottom, essentially, and the user wouldn't be able to tell the difference between where they are, I suppose, regarding the heading to the point of, again, the main text. I'll just jump back into my friend here. And As I said, also line spacing is important when it comes to again, to a Word document essentially, and again ensuring that something is at least 1.5 and line spacing is adapted to the document. Like you see from there, from the image essentially all the way through, you've probably seen online a lot clearer, is that it's a difference between how you would view the document essentially all the way through, where you have poor line spacing within the document. Alternative text. Ross, do you want to speak on alternative text?
Yeah, sure. So alternative text, or alt text for short is text that can be applied to an image that basically gives a description of what the image is about, and the content of the image. And so it's really important to use alt text in your documents, particularly for people who use screen readers. It's really vital that you use alt text, because without it, they will have no idea what an image looks like. And adding alt text is really simple. I'm going to do an example now. Just bear with me there. Is that?
Yeah, there.
And so here, as you can see, I have an image. It's a representation of the statue of Zeus at Olympia. Now, if I want to add alt text to this image, I right click it. I go add edit alt text, and here towards the right of the screen, audio will pop up with a box, and it will ask me to add alt text. Now the key and you write on text is to imagine that you're describing the image to someone on a phone. So be brief, but at the same time try and be descriptive. So in this case, we might write a statue of Zeus as Olympia. The god is sea-eated. He owns a scepter and a winged Ike. Now, whenever someone with the screen reader looks at that image, that is what they'll hear. And so, yeah, it's very simple to do.
Thanks, Ross, all the way through. So you said alt text is some symbol that we can all apply to any images put up there. It just gives better context, as Ross has alluded to, regarding how people would understand the information, especially if you're visually impaired. Obviously, you can see how vital it is to them, essentially, all the way through. The accessibility checker within Microsoft Word also is a tool that I'll quickly point on all the way through. So within the document here down below, you'll see accessibility, that's issues with it per se all the way through. By clicking on it, it will bring up the accessibility checker on the right hand side of your screen per se, and it will tell you what the issues are per se. Hard to read contrast, for example. And missing all text, and it will ask you as Ross has alluded to add a description, or if you felt that it wasn't a text that was anything to do with the information or provide information, you can mark it as being decorative essentially within the document per se, which takes it off the list. It also will obviously look at contrast issues. It will look at a whole other issues also regarding structure, headings essentially all the way through. So it's a really good starting point if you're working with Microsoft products to check out how you would make those documents accessible. PowerPoint obviously and Word being the most obvious ones here essentially all the way through. From there, once you know you have that completed, once you post it to Ally, those issues should be reduced or completely eliminated essentially per se all the way through. Sorry for my computer to decide to do what I should do. Can you there we go. Sorry, it's taking a while to back into action. So we obviously with the use of these tools, when you come to use them, it's one thing sitting in front of people and them telling you how to do it essentially all the way through, but it's different when you come to actually do it yourself and you come across some issues essentially all the way through. So we are obviously open to meeting with people or coming to individual departments or staff meetings essentially all the way through, if there was questions or issues that needed further information or clarity on essentially all the way through. We are running a drop-in service within the disability service from Thursdays 1 to 3 o'clock. You can mail in either to askds@tcd.ie and also into the Trinity Inc email address essentially, and we'll be able to come back to you regarding support. I just obviously wanted to show you one last thing before we finish up, because I know we said we'd keep it to half an hour, and I'm very much the same of trying to keep something to that time. Is regarding Ally essentially and how it works per se all the way through. So I've logged into Ally here essentially all the way through. I'm on the left hand side. I'm just going to go into a module that I'm one of the instructors for essentially all the way through. And obviously, for people who are familiar with building content within Ally, you would then start adding information to your module per se, or breaking it down by lecture type or lecture as you all the way through. As you add information to it, usually file or item per se. If I try to add in, for example, I'll give it a name, just call it test for this case. Okay, I'm going to browse to where my document is, my Van Gogh options here all the way through, and add it to the document. If you are, submit. When I go to the information here all the way through, you see essentially as a processor the test will come up here, and on the left hand side it will show me how good my document is. So I go into it here, it's telling me there's issues with it essentially by the traffic score here on the right hand side. And by clicking on that, essentially that traffic line, it will tell me where it is essentially and what the issues are per se all the way through. Now, as I said, if you by running this through the accessibility checker in Word, you'll reduce that down. That score will jump quite considerably. We're not asking 100%, or that's utopia, I suppose. I think we're looking at something around 50–60% essentially that your document is usable essentially all the way through. But I said I suppose Ally does give that valuable information to that you can, it tells you what it means, why it's important essentially, and also it will guide you to that step in Office 365 to do it as well all the way through in that scenario all the way through. To provide finally just a bit of context on what on how many documents are up there essentially regarding information that's there at the moment. I did look at Ally this morning essentially, and you can see this is looking at campus-wide modules that are currently live for 22-23 essentially all the way through. And you can see there's already 14,000, short of 14,000 documents up there that are untagged. There's over 12,000 documents up there currently for this academic year 22-23 that have no image in them per se all the way. So a lot of those structure as well is also in there. No heading, 7,000 documents essentially all the way through. So those things that we just covered very quickly, and I think are very easily achievable by everybody per se all the way through. They're not something that should be, I suppose, onerous in any shape, mean, or form for us to do essentially or to complete. So it's something that we would like to see people engage with or engage with the support on it per se. And if they had issues regarding the content, especially around Microsoft Word, I'm talking about Word here today, to come back to us on it per se all the way through. But again, by just adding those 5 short tools to Word, images, structure, running through a checker, line spacing, font type, that score, that if we had a 20% would automatically would jump right up to 50-60% per se all the way through in the document. All the way through. We are going to cover further sessions on obviously where PDF is being important. A lot of academic information will be posted as a PDF per se all the way through. It does link back to Word essentially because you can create the I suppose your original document might start off as a Word document, then you create the PDF. The same kind of principles apply, but we'll cover that as well. And similarly with PowerPoint as well, we'll cover that stuff as well. Regarding it as well, and maybe delve a bit more into the Ally scenario all the way through. I know time is over, so I don't want to hold people for a bit longer because I know half an hour is what we said to keep to. Just keep in mind if you do have questions for us to mail into askds@tc.ie or mail into Trinity Inc. directly, and we can come back to you on that query per se all the way through. If there's any queries since then, has any stuff came up, Ross? Any stuff in the chat?
Not that I can see, no.
Okay.
I said any questions?
I can see the pictures and the documents that have already done.
Yeah, usually it's based on the person what had the document previously, maybe used it and reusing it and repost it again, essentially all the way through. And I'm not looking at the document, but some of this stuff can be quickly remediated. Adding all text to it, adding a bit of structure to it. It's just a matter of opening the document and literally tagging through it simply all the way through. I know time is an issue when it comes to doing this work, but some of that stuff is quite simple, or even marking stuff as decorative if it's not an image that's actually used to create the information that you're trying to put over. And it just makes the whole experience for someone with, I suppose, diverse needs a lot more easy to engage with essentially all the way through. But I said, if there's questions, please feel free to come back to us. Our website has a lot of information. I think Ross will post that. If not, we'll send that information on to you for people who have attended. And thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.